Thanks everybody for being here today, joining us at I believe the first ever Bitcoin Insurance Summit. So we're making history right here today in Wynwood in Miami. So my talk is titled Bitcoin Needs Insurance, Insurance Needs Bitcoin. I've got two stories to tell, neither of which are about Bitcoin. But don't worry, we'll bring it all together. We'll tie it together very shortly here. So, two stories. The first is about fire, and the second is about coffee. And hopefully everybody's drinking coffee from Savage Labs here this morning. So, Bitcoin needs insurance. Fire. The insurance industry's response to fire catastrophes, urban fire catastrophes. This is, I think, a really important analytical construct for us as we walk through the importance of not just insurance to any particular industry, but the importance of insurance to society in general. So throughout history, really the modern era, there were massive catastrophic fires that caused just devastating loss. The Great Fire of London being like one of the first major ones. The Great Fire of Chicago, 1871 in the United States, was probably one of the largest, and just, like I said, catastrophic. Hundreds of thousands of buildings lost, damages just astronomical. And so, what did society do about it? Well, at first, the insurance, talking about 1666, the insurance industry was very nascent, practically didn't exist. It was more marked by guilds, mutual aid societies coming together to kind of pool resources as cooperative. And then you had insurance growing up, and kind of the first way that the industry engaged with fire safety and the risk of urban fires was through these plaques that they could put on buildings. If you're from London or have been to London, you might have seen some of these. And what these plaques were was the Sun Insurance Company was one of the biggest. If you passed their kind of rudimentary underwriting procedures, you got the emblem, and then you qualified for their private fire brigade. So the insurance companies would literally go out and put out your fire if you had insurance with them, right? So a very hands-on, direct engagement with this risk, right? Also great marketing tools, provided incentive to actually get underwritten. I can't imagine it was like all that organized though. I can imagine major fires and just like brigades, kind of like Keystone Cops going everywhere. So eventually it professionalized. And then what happened is we had this evolution of the insurance industry. We started early 19th century. We had, those basic risk classes. It was kind of things like, are you a brick house? Are you a thatched house? Things like that. Rules of thumb. It was like the rates were the same across the board. There was no differentiation. Then we started to get into more risk classes, detailed by construction types, different methods of construction. And crucially, we had cooperative sharing of loss data among the early insurers through like trade associations, basically. And then rate setting started to become more localized and more specific to account for the risk. And then by essentially the Belle Epoque, classical kind of gold standard era, we had very sophisticated underwriting, data-driven approaches, and we started to get national codes being adopted. Right, and this is a little bit hard to see, but you can see, kind of like call and answer, cause and effect, and response by the insurance industry. Great Fire of New York, and then eventually you had National Board of Fire Underwriters, Great Chicago Fire. Then this is an important one I want to call out, was the Underwriters Laboratory being established. This was established by the National Board of Fire Underwriters to test and create standards for an emerging risky technology that had the potential for great societal change, which is electricity, right? So you're moving from something that initially looked extraordinarily risky compared to, whale oil lanterns and, open flames. But then once you actually understood the technology and how to harness it and how to put controls in place, it actually became much safer, right, than having an open flame in your house. And fires began to reduce, right? So one of the largest, 1911 horrible Triangle Shirley factory fire. But again, we're getting smaller in magnitude, right? As the insurance industry is getting more and more involved and engaged in this risk. And so this is why I think this is a great analytical construct, because just like electricity, Bitcoin is a new technology that appears very risky, and indeed, because of concentrated risk right now in custodians, Coinbase, and elsewhere, is potentially very societally damaging if we have large losses at that scale. But if the insurance industry runs towards this risk and engages with it, just like fire safety, and helps to promulgate data-driven, evidence-based standards, we can reduce the risk involved with Bitcoin at a societal level and make it into a profitable industry as well. So it's a great story. I think it's really important for us to keep in mind, especially regulation is important, and we need regulation at the societal level. But it needs to be, again, evidence-based and, quite frankly, market-driven. Right, going back to those price settings. Let's give discounts for good technological practices, good security practices, good controls. And the great thing about Bitcoin is it's programmatic money. So you can take those best practices that evolve through evidence-based underwriting, data sharing, and you can encode those directly into policies that will fire automatically, right? So you are removing that human element of Bitcoin. So why does insurance need Bitcoin? And now we're going to talk about coffee. This one's a little bit less intuitive, so just stick with me. Shifting global trade led to more coffee, led to the birth, essentially, of the modern insurance industry, okay? So in 1637, Nathaniel Canobius, a scholar at Oxford, brewed what is supposed to be the first cup of coffee in England. And folks in the room who are familiar with the insurance industry know the name Canobius. That's a very large global insurer, and presumably, I think it's probably on their website, they do derive their name from the scholar Nathaniel Canobius. And why would they, randomly pick this 17th century scholar, right? Well, it's because, again, coffee ended up shaping the industry. So that first cup that Canobius sipped, the beans most likely came overland from Yemen, through either Istanbul, perhaps Venice, and then on into Amsterdam. He was actually a continental scholar that moved to England, so that makes sense. He brought the coffee with him from the continent to England. But as shipping technology, navigation technology became more advanced and trade started to blossom, that's an effect of that navigation and the shipping technology increasing, and trade becoming freer and more abundant, what happened was the Dutch took the coffee from Yemen and put it into the East Indies and started cultivating it there. Then the English were able to access it eventually, and now you had a huge pipeline directly up into the Isles, the British Isles. And so 1600, East India Company's founded. You've got the apocryphal first cup of coffee. And then 1686, we got Edward Lloyd, who opens his coffee house, which then becomes Lloyd's of London, right? And these coffee houses became the nodes, the informational and the commercial nodes within London. It is where the professional class gathered to do business and to trade information. Very importantly, Lloyd's List, this is the first official publication, but I believe towards the end of the 17th century, Lloyd's was already promulgating a list of information about different shipping opportunities, insurance opportunities amongst the patrons there. And these coffee houses were open 24/7, essentially fueling commerce through caffeine, right? Stockbroking also grew out of Jonathan's Coffee House in London, right? So you had this virtuous cycle that was happening by that maybe those who were in the insurance and the financial industry didn't even understand was coming. right? But the second and third order effects of this global trade and technological advancements in shipping brought coffee, better shipping, better commerce, led to insurance, better marine insurance, better financing for these ventures, which brought more coffee, which fueled more commerce, right? So you get that virtuous cycle. And this is just a summary of that information exchange network, business specialization, information publication, standardization of the business practices. This is where the Lloyd's practices slips. Brokers going around from table to table in the coffee house with a slip of paper, getting the names, the people putting up capital for a venture would put it right there with the coffee stains right next to it. Right? And so this is why insurance needs Bitcoin. Because we are currently undergoing a technological and financial revolution, just like shipping and global trade in the 18th century. But this revolution is not going to take centuries to happen. It's going to happen within our lifetimes because it's digital. It's moving at the speed of light. Bitcoin is digital. It moves at the speed of light. It trades 24/7, deep liquidity, $2 trillion asset almost. Superior monetary qualities for saving. And especially today where we've got increasing trade barriers globally, cost of business is going to rise. We need a neutral medium of exchange and a neutral savings asset. And if the insurance industry and those in this room, I think, are already thinking this way, can begin harnessing this technology, it will create a virtuous cycle for those early adopters. And those who don't adopt are going to be left behind. And that's where we're heading. And so I just share these two stories today because I think, again, they're good analytical constructs and they set the stage for what I hope to be those same types of discussions about commerce and trade that happened in early England in those coffee houses. We can have that here today. So thank you again for joining us at the Bitcoin Insurance Summit, and please enjoy the rest of your day.